Hello, beautiful, lightful souls. I am so excited to be here today with Stephen Simon, who is the film producer of Somewhere in Time and What Dreams May Come. And I know many near-death experiencers love this film, What Dreams May Come, because the consciousness that we all felt on the other side is somehow portrayed beautifully in this film. So this is going to be an unusual conversation, but a really blessed one in many ways. Stephen also has a book, which I'm going to let him just begin talking to you about. And this book is available. The links are below on Amazon. But he wrote it after his wife, Lauren, transitioned to the other side of the veil. And from what I can tell, I haven't read the book yet, but you got assistance from your wife in writing this book. Is this correct?
Oh, we wrote it together.
Wow.
Oh, we definitely wrote it together. So first of all, thank you for doing this. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, so I appreciate it very much, Tricia. I think in introducing the book, I probably need to go back because when you look at my life, as they say, from 10,000 feet, this book was just the natural thing that was going to happen because I have had a very purpose-driven life. And the purpose has been to illuminate aspects of spirituality. When I was 6 years old, my birth dad, had died. My mother had remarried, and I was living with my mom and my sister and my stepfather. And I would tell my parents in the morning, there was a man in my wall last night. And they were like, what? And yeah, there's a man in my wall every night. And they're like, are you scared? And I'm like, no, I'm not scared at all. He's really nice. And he's very comforting, but he's in my wall every night. Well, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was obviously my dad, the spirit of my dad, who was there to encourage me and to still love me as he could from the other side. That was my introduction. I grew up loving movies like Lost Horizon, It's a Wonderful Life, The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, films like that. And I always knew I was going to get involved in the film industry. My goodness, my dad was a producer and a director. My stepfather was a producer. It led me to that. I had some other experiences. I went to law school. I passed the bar. I became a lawyer for about a minute and a half. But when I could get in, I got in. And what happened was I went to a bookstore. The clerk knew me. He said, hey, we have this new book in by Richard Matheson. Richard had written It's an Incredible Shrinking Man, I Am Legend, a lot of Twilight Zone episodes. He's one of the great fantasy spiritual writers of the last century. And the book was called Bid Time Return. And I took the book home. I read it that night. The next day, I went to a dear family friend named Ray Stark, who had produced a lot of movies with Barbra Streisand. He was a very successful producer. And I just said, Ray, I've got to get in now. I always knew I was going to get in the business. I got to get in. And he was like, wait a second. Because he and his wife were very close friends with my mother. And he said, I'm going to take you out of the practice of law and put you in the film business. Your mother will kill me. And I'm like, I'll kill you if you don't. So he hired me. First thing I did was find out who Richard Matheson's agent was. We had lunch. I said, I need to learn how to produce movies, but this is going to be the first one I do. We shook hands, and 3 years later, Bid Time Return became Somewhere in Time. And so that was my first film as a producer. When we were prepping Somewhere in Time, Richard gave me the galleys for his next novel, which was What Dreams May Come. And I said, Richard, this is the greatest love story I've ever read. I have no idea how we're going to do this, but I'm going to make this too. And he said, okay, it took 20 years, which is a long story as to why, but it took 20 years. I then got involved after that. A partner and I founded the Spiritual Cinema Circle, which we sent movies out, spiritual movies out to our subscribers for every month for over 16 years. I produced and directed the film version of Conversations with God. And I made a little movie called Indigo. All of that led up to me meeting the love of my life in 2003. We both wound up at a movie theater in a small town outside of Gresham. I was there because they were doing a retrospective screening of What Dreams May Come 5 years after it had been released. And they asked me to come speak, and I did. And I saw this woman, the profile of a woman in the theater, and I walked up to her and she turned around and looked at me, and it was a movie moment. Now, we both laughed about this for
Kind
years.
of like in What Dreams May Come when Robin Williams.
It was more like the look between Jane and Chris in Somewhere in Time.
Oh.
So I looked at her and I looked in her eyes. We talked about it later. We both had the same feeling, was, oh, there she is, there he is. And we both went home and called significant people in our lives. I'd had 2 very unsuccessful marriages. So had she. We had 5 kids. We had a combined family. And it was by far and away the happiest time of my life. Lauren was and is a gifted intuitive. And it's weird, and I know you are as well. It's weird living with an intuitive when you're not used to it. Hey, have you heard from your friend Michael in a while? No, well, he's gonna call pretty soon. Phone rings, right? So we talked about what our afterlife experience would be. I was at that time 16 years older than Lauren. We both thought it would be me that transitioned first. Now she delights in saying, well, now, honey, you're almost 21 years older than me because I'm still back there. And she's right. We talked about it a great deal. Lauren got stage 3 thyroid cancer, and she had been a marathon runner. She survived it, but the iodine radiation treatment basically destroyed her. And last year and a half of her life, it did cure her of the thyroid cancer, but she was incredibly weak. And during that year, there was a moment in which she said, honey, let's design our afterlife. We really got to be very specific. And she went into trance and we talked about things. She said, write everything down. Towards the end, she would curl up in my lap at night. I'm going to start to cry. Anyway, if I start to cry, just know that our kids say dad cries at card tricks, and they're right. But we both had a sense that something was coming and we didn't know what it was. January 3rd of 2018, so it was 4 years ago this past Monday, I went to the gym early in the morning and I came home and found that she had transitioned in her sleep. I walked into the bedroom and knew something was wrong. I touched her. She was already cold. She'd been gone for a while. And it just devastated me, as it does with so many people who have that experience. And I was like, okay, well, we talked about this. I know she'll be in touch. But for the first 6 weeks, there was nothing. And
I'm so glad you said that, because I contact, and many people contact me who have lost a spouse or lost someone really deeply close to them. And I believe the body has to grieve for a while before you can even start to pick up on that it's perfectly natural and normal. The body goes through a depression. It goes through a time of pain.
Yeah, and as a dear friend of ours said, Cynthia, who is also our lawyer, because those first 6 weeks, I honestly just wanted to die too. I just wanted to be with her. It was a really brutal experience. And Cynthia, in her inimitable way, said, hey, listen, you know what? She needs a little break from you. Why don't you hang around for a while, give her a break? 6 weeks later, she made contact. And I talk about that in detail, or we talk about it in our book. So I won't go into the details of it here, but she did get in contact, and the contact has been very regular ever since. And we talk about that a lot in the book. I'll get to this story.
Talk to her, just, you kind of hear her voice and see her, and she sends you feelings. How does it come for you?
Yes. I don't hear her voice because her voice is part of her body, and her body was cremated. So I do not hear her voice in the way of hearing it through my ears, but I feel it in my heart. And I know it's her because I know of the cadence. I know the things that she says. She still teases me mercilessly, which is what we used to do when she was still physical. And I started making notes about that, just a diary for me. And so that I could go back and look at it later and hopefully be comforted by it. So in September of 2018, I went to Ashland, Oregon. I live outside of Portland. And I had dinner with my dear friend, Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote the Conversations with God books, and with him and his wife. It's very important to note that at that point, there had not been any rain in Ashland in several months. They were going through quite a drought. We had dinner, we started to talk, and at one point, I was facing the windows of the restaurant, and Neil and Em were across from me. At one point, Neil said, "How have you been doing? What's going on?" And I told him, "Well, you know what? I've been making all these notes of everything, Neil," which is what Neil did when he wrote Conversations with God. It's exactly how he wrote Conversations with God. And I said, "I've been making all these notes, Neil, and I got to tell you something. I have a feeling this might be a book." At that point, there was a huge lightning strike outside the window. Anybody can Google Ashland, Oregon, September 28th, 2018. You'll see what the weather was like. They hadn't seen that in a long time. So we were startled. And I looked at Neil and he said, "And I know the title, Another Lightning Strike." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "What Dreams Have Come." So the title is entirely Neil's, Another Lightning Strike. And then I got an incredible sense and I said, "You know what? I have a feeling Lauren and I need to write this together. Fifth Lightning Strike." Now we spent the rest of the evening like marveling, we're not in Kansas anymore. It was an extraordinary event. And then we started the process of writing the book. And the people who have read the book have already seen this. Anyone that looks at it, her dialogue with me is in a different typeset so that people can actually really get the sense of that. And we talk quite a bit about the experience, about the guilt and the shame that I felt, which I think most people who lose someone that dear to them, it's like, could I have done something? What if I'd gotten there sooner? Could I have saved her? And Lauren made it very clear to me that the reason I wasn't there sooner is I wasn't supposed to be. That was her time. Then I began to become aware with her helping me that we had planned this for a very long time. Our spiritual beliefs are that our souls plan our lives. And, there's a time to come in and there's a time to go back to the other side. Lauren and I had been together in several other lifetimes. And we knew that we had planned this way for her to be on the other side and me to be here. I'm 75 now. This is going to be the culminating project of my life. And I plan to spend the next however many years I have getting it to people, because the reason we wrote it is to encourage people who are having this experience, who are afraid to talk about it because they're afraid their family and their friends will make fun of them or will think they're crazy or whatever. This is not, as you know, Tricia, a rare experience. Communicating to the other side, the veil may be getting thinner, but millions of people have this experience. And we're hoping that our book will encourage them to talk about it more so that more people feel comfortable with it.
Oh, good. And it's interesting. You must have read my mind, because I was going to ask you, like, from the heart, who's your ideal audience for the book? And you answered that to a degree. I always ask people, because people come to hear near-death experiencers speak, and I'm like, but how many people here have had a spiritual experience? And everyone raises their hand. I mean, there's the rare atheist or agnostic who, they've had one, but they've denied it in some part of their mind. But yeah, I think conversation and just owning it. And as a medium, I always tell people, look, your loved one better than anyone else. When you open up that veil of communication, you're going to know it's them. Their energy will be recognizable to you. And so what are I'd love to hear more about like reactions that people have had who haven't talked about this, but you've encouraged them to express it.
If people go to our website, which is whatdreamshavecome.com, you will see that there's a link there to email me directly. And I talk to people about this a lot, and I really encourage people who want to share their experience to do that. Somebody emailed me and said, well, this probably isn't being read by Stephen. It's probably being read by his assistant, but I want to tell him this. And I said, I don't have an assistant. And nobody has access to these emails other than me. No one will ever see them other than me. I will never talk about them with anybody else. But please share your experiences. And oh my goodness, it has been so uplifting for me and so positive for me and for Lauren to see that the audience that we're reaching, which is without question not what we would call a mainstream audience, this is not Star Wars. This is something that's very specific. We're getting the kind of responses that we want to get. And I've gotten a couple of emails that I've really appreciated. One in particular saying, how do you know this is real? How do you know you didn't make this up just to comfort yourself? And it's a great question and a fair question. And the only honest way to answer it, if you're asking me if I know this in a way, like if I know if I go up to the roof and drop off an apple, it's going to fall to the ground because of gravity. Do I know it in that way? 99 and 9/10% yes, but there's a little piece of me that I cannot say absolutely knows that because I can't prove it scientifically to anybody.
But I'm sure you have so many verifiable moments where she's told you to do something. And can you share some of those moments along the way where you know that you have communication?
You do have that, you do,
yes,
but
yes.
It is still up in my heart, and we talk about this a lot in the book. There was a movie many, many years ago that had a great line in it. The heart is a mysterious organ. It plays by its own rules. And we talk about the language of the heart in this book a lot. Trust your heart. The heart speaks in a completely different way than our brains do. Our brains are little computers, that kind of spit out information and stuff like that. Our hearts lead us, and our souls communicate to us through our hearts. That is the language of love. And that is the language that I know that we are speaking. And I also know the things that I have felt and heard from her are things that only she would know and only things that she would do. So it's been very comforting for me, but people can ask me any difficult question you want to ask, or if you just want to share your own experience of this, I welcome that.
So I have some questions for you, sort of along the lines of from the movie, What Dreams May Come, but you can relay it to the book as well.
Sure.
One of the charming parts of the movie is when Robin Williams' friend, the doctor, is younger in life. He takes on a different form in the afterlife. And I love that because every time spirit comes through, they might choose a teenage year, their 20s, the 30s, 40s, but rarely is someone, who they were older in life. And what was your take when making that film? Was that a fun?
Well, I will tell you also, it is one of the very first things that Lauren said to me when we were designing our afterlife. How old are we going to be? and we decided that what it was going to be. What Dreams May Come was an incredible challenge. An incredible challenge. And that's why it took 20 years to get it made. It's a rough story. It's a very tough story. And if you just tell the blueprint for that, it's a really rough story to tell. The book was even rougher. And that was one of the biggest problems that we had, because in the book, Robin's character, Chris, dies in this car accident. The two children are still alive, and Annie takes her own life. She commits suicide, leaving the children orphans. And we knew we could not do that in a film, because you're not going to have sympathy for a woman who leaves her children orphans. We knew we had to fix that. And fortunately, the incredible screenwriter, Ron Bass, who did this, who had gotten the Academy Award for Rain Man and had written a lot of other scripts, got an incredible flash of inspiration at one point and said, I know how to do that. We'll have the kids die before the movie starts. And then she tries to commit suicide, and her love for him saves her the first time. But when he dies, she has to go be with him. And we can use the children on the other side, which was a brilliant way of dealing with it. That was a problem, certainly showing the afterlife in the way that it was done. I had so many directors that I talked to over the years, a couple of whom are very famous, who said to me, hey, I would love to do this. I don't know how. I don't know how you spend almost the entire movie in an afterlife and make it believable. I don't know what to put on the screen. I wish I did, but I don't know.
But do you think we have the technological capability now?
Well, this is what happened. Two things happened. I met this wonderful director from New Zealand named Vincent Ward, who I gave the script to, and he had made some visionary films in New Zealand. And I knew he would be able to get it. And he read it, he thought about it, and he said, you know, I got to tell you, I'm sorry. I'm going to be one of those other guys that you've talked to. I don't know how to do this. And I was really disappointed. But like a week or two later, I got a phone from him and he said, I know how to do it. And I was like, oh, thank you. And we sat down and met, and I said, what do you want to do? And he said, well, in the book and in the early versions of the script, Annie was a caterer. And he said, no, she's not going to be a caterer. She's going to work at a museum. She's a curator for art, and she's a painter herself. Because then when Robin goes into the afterlife, he can come into her paintings, which will be a very comforting place for him. And we'll work it out that he is the only human figure interacting in a world of wet paint. And I was just stunned. And I said, can we do that? This is now 1996. And I said, can we do that? And he said, of course we can do that. And I said, do you know how to do it? He said, of course not. But we'll figure it out. And he and our production designer and our incredible camera people figured that out. That was all Vincent. That incredible vision on screen was all Vincent. And, you know, he's a genius.
And I think that people who are creative, the ones that I've talked to on the other side, really enjoy creating over there. So it makes sense to me that she was a painter and that, you know, they connected in that realm. And I want to hear more about how you and Lauren created your afterlife together. Like, I'm always curious, you know, what people want to experience there. And I think more people need to think about that. And I'm putting that in the minds of people listening right now. It's important to think ahead of time about what you want to experience.
I ask you to forgive me up front. One thing that Lauren and I agreed about is that we were not going to talk about the details of that. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I'm glad you asked the question, and I apologize for not answering it directly. But this is one of the few things that we decided that we wanted to keep just for ourselves. However, there's a reason for it. And the reason for it is that in the book, we make, I hope, a very passionate plea for people to stop arguing about what the afterlife is like. Different religions and different spiritual beliefs have different visions of that. And Oprah Winfrey quite brilliantly at one point said there are many pathways to God and many definitions of God. So what is our afterlife experience, the dream that we have? The great writer Robert Monroe wrote a sentence once about this, is that people in the afterlife can, if they choose, live together on islands of consensual realities. And that just always struck a chord. So if you believe that you are going to be with God, and God is the traditional religious figure of God, then why can't you be? You know, if you're going to be in whatever version of that you feel is your belief system, that's what we want to, that's why we don't want to specifically talk, because for us, what is just the dream would not be the dream for somebody else.
Yes, I get that. And I guess I have to add, though, that, you know, as a medium, I've talked with people, and they are still, people who are creative are still creating wonderful things, hoping that someone might energetically pick up on it, that they might inspire architects or painters or other people. Like, they love creation so much that they continue to create. And so that's part of why I encourage people, think about what you want to experience within whatever realm you want to experience it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Lauren and I are both big movie buffs. We have a section at the end of our book about movies that deal with all of these subject matters that we think will encourage people and uplift people, including whether or not this world we walk around in that we call real, is this the real world? Or is this the illusion and the other side is the real world? And that is the single central focus point right now of astrophysics and everyone that is working in that field, because there's a lot of evidence that that may indeed be the case. And all you have to do is look at the Matrix movies. They did a brilliant thing of creating these incredible action films around the concept of, are you willing to take the red pill and see what it's like? Or do you want to take the blue pill? There's a movie called 13th Floor that is all about this is an illusion and there is someplace else. Avatar is very much that. There's a lot of things that I think are going on now, Tricia, and I'm glad that we are at least a small part of that.
Yeah. Well, one of the moments of my near-death experience was early on. I just realized the physical was, in my mind, theater. Oh, that this is the costume we put on, and now I'm in reality. Like, as soon as I died, it felt like, okay, this is the reality. The thing that I have problems with when people start talking about these theories is love was the great healer, that unconditional love that I felt in the presence of divinity, that it healed so many wounds. And I really do believe like that can't be necessarily explained by some theories, that you can't take the love out, that love is how you keep talking to Lauren. I mean, it's the love that's the connector.
Absolutely. And it is that love that got me through that period of time and got me to the book. It's interesting, we all have issues, right? We all have baggage that we take with us and we work on it and we deal with it. And sometimes we deal with it well, sometimes we don't deal with it as well. My issue before I met Lauren was abandonment. And I don't need to go into the details, all of it, because it'll bore everybody, but that was my issue. You would think that Lauren's transition would have taken that to a whole new level. And it was exactly the opposite, because I knew there was no way that she was abandoning me. I never gave up hope during those first 6 weeks. I never thought, oh my God, this isn't going to happen. I always knew it would. And it's interesting that it was so counterintuitive that love, that kind of unconditional love, and knowing she would be there, resolved those issues for me. And I think that's the way with everyone who has these connections. You realize that there's something much more going on in your life, and the love that we feel with the other side and through that veil, which is thinning and has gotten thinner and thinner and thinner, I think is what sustains us. And it's just a wonderful way to have hope again in your life, because when you lose that, whether it be your spouse, a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, God forbid a child, because I think that's the single worst experience that a human being has to go through if they lose a child that way. Everyone has those experiences. And I think when their loved one connects with them, it heals a lot of the pain in their heart.
So I have a question for you about what dreams may come.
Sure.
When you decided that you were going to go forward with this, did you have the vision that so many spiritual people like me and others who've had these experiences would deeply connect with this movie, would go, oh, you've really captured something about consciousness, or you really, it was just so affirming to me and many people that this movie was made. Did you know that in advance, or did you hope this, or what was your process with that?
Yes, I mean, I was definitely aware of that and hoped for that. What attracted me to mostly to Dreams was the love story, because the obstacles between lovers are the keys to any great love story. Going back to Romeo and Juliet, you know, what is keeping the lovers apart? And the idea of it being literally the veil and her being on the other side was, to me, one of the great challenges that any love story could ever face. And I was hoping that it would do that. I was hoping, and I've been very gratified that a number of spiritual teachers, there was actually somebody back east, I think in Massachusetts, who taught an entire class a semester of the theology of what dreams may come. Actually, that reminds me of something that I hope that you'll get some fun with. And it's a story about dreams that that reminds me of we create our own reality. So when the film came out, I went to a birthday party at a friend of mine's house who lived in Santa Barbara. And he had about 60 or 70 of his people, his friends there. And at one point, he thanked everybody, and everyone's in the living room. And he said, "Have any of you seen What Dreams May Come?" And a whole bunch of people's hands went up. It's a very spiritual group. And as he always likes to do with his friends, he said, "Well, you're in luck because the producer is here tonight. He's standing right there. If you have anything you want to say to him, go talk to him." And so this is what happened. I'll give you the first couple of things. Young guy walks up to me, very nice looking, sweet looking young man. And he said, "Oh, I saw this movie with a dear friend of mine. And she knows that I live are in and around the film industry. She said, if you ever meet anybody from that film, will you deliver a message for me? Can I deliver it to you?" And I said, "Sure." And he looked at me and he said, "She wants you to know that you're an inhuman monster." And I knew exactly where that was coming from, because we got that about a certain aspect of the film. And in the most perfect comic timing, he then puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "I hope you don't take that personally." And I knew what he was talking about. He was talking about the aspect of suicide, because as Robin is told by Cuba in the film, we see what we want to see. It's not like, I'll believe it when I see it. It's like, I'll see it when I believe it. And people who had that fear thought we said all suicides go to hell. And they were deeply hurt and deeply offended, as well they should be. And I can tell you and your audience, we spent weeks talking about that. And if you look at the film again, you will see when Robin is introduced to all of this by Cuba's character, who turns out to be his son, he explains that to him. This was Annie's choice. This is what Annie chose to do, which is what gives Robin's character the courage to go find her. Then there was somebody that came after it, was very angry and said, "You call yourself spiritual?" And I'm like, "Why?" And he said, "So you get all this money, you get this big movie star to be in your movie, you make this movie about the afterlife, and every image you have is a Judeo-Christian image. You should be ashamed of yourself." And he turned around and walked away. A couple of minutes later, another young guy comes up to me and says, "You know, I just did my dissertation on movies about the afterlife. I've seen them all. And I have to congratulate you, because yours is the only movie without a single Judeo-Christian image in it."
Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch it again.
So, you know, we do see what we want to see, and we knew that movie would, in a way, be a Rorschach of a test for people. When we would preview it, we would stand outside after they filled in their preview cards and stuff like that, and we would see people walking out in pitched arguments about different aspects of the film, which for me, as a filmmaker, to me, that's the greatest compliment. You know, you don't want people seeing your movie and walking out and feeling like they just had a Chinese dinner and be hungry 20 minutes later, right? You know, the old saying about that. You don't want people to say, "You know, it was pretty good." Oh, Horrible. I'd so much rather have people either love it with a passion or hate it with a passion because you're stirring their hearts.
Exactly. And when you think about seeing what you're going to see, like I did not see that at all. The suicide was a big part of what drew me to the film because part of my story is I tried to commit suicide before my near-death experience. And I saw it in my life review. And what I saw was great compassion, and just compassion for me and all those who have. And this reminder to those who are living to reach out to others. And I feel like those on the other side of the veil often remind people to reach out, to form more community here, and to not suffer alone. That's part of that's a message I feel from the other side, from Robin Williams and a few others who have come to me in spirit, that we are meant to heal one another. So I think your message is healing, like what you're putting out there in that film and in your book is probably helping people heal and find community.
Very much so. And it is so incredibly satisfying, as you know, because you do this work. You do a different form of it, not making movies, but you do a different form of it when you know that something that you have communicated to another person has really made a difference in their lives. It's the most gratifying feeling in the world, isn't it? I mean, you really feel like, I did my job today. I did my work today. And the fact that Dreams is still going, people are still talking about it. Somewhere in Time, where we shot Somewhere in Time on Mackinac Island, every year in October, the entire hotel, the Grand Hotel, is filled with fans of the film. They do a Somewhere in Time weekend. And Somewhere in Time was a bomb when it first came out.
I remember.
We got eviscerated by the critics. The audiences did not go, and it was heartbreaking. I grew this in 1980 because I was so depressed as a result of that. I haven't shaved it since. I probably never will. But it caught on. And now there are people who, consider it one of their favorite films. That's also a tremendously gratifying ride when you have something like that. And it is, I guess, it's like coming back from the dead, which it kind of did. It's a very rewarding thing. And I'm so glad, because I know you love Dreams. Let me tell you another story about Dreams that you might enjoy. So do you remember the sequence when he gets closer to Annie and he gets to a place where he starts walking over an entire field of upturned faces who are buried in the ground?
Yes.
You remember that? So the movie is being designed. Our production designer, Eugenio Zanetti, who got an Academy Award nomination for that film, which he very richly deserved, comes to me and he says, "Have you seen the designs for that?" When we're in pre-production. And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, you need to see them." And he put them on my desk. And I was horrified. I was absolutely horrified. So I went to Vincent. I went into his office and I closed the door and I said, "What is this? Vincent, we're making a love story. We don't want to create images that are so terrifying for people that it turns them off. I don't want to do this. I'm really adamantly opposed to it." Well, we went at it. And producers and directors often do that. Vincent is, and always will be a dear, dear friend of mine. It was never personal. It was always about the work, but boy, did we go at each other. So much so that we found out that all the other people in the office walked out into the parking lot because they didn't want to hear the producer and director kill each other. So we're arguing back and forth. And at one point, Vincent says to me, "Stephen, this is about a man who goes through hell to save the soul of his wife. He does not go through heck." And I cracked up, started to laugh. And within 30 seconds, we were both on the floor rolling around crying and laughing. And I said, "Okay, I surrender." And when we previewed the film and people filled in their preview cards, that scene was always got the most votes for most favorite scene and also got the most votes for least favorite scene. So we were both right.
Isn't that funny? And and true, because he does, like the Greek mythology, he goes to hell to save his wife. And I love that image myself, I mean, of what you mentioned, because it's not always easy. I mean, the spiritual journey isn't easy. Without spiritual assistance, it's still not easy. I mean, there's so many parts of life that are challenging, and I never shy away from those, like, because that's where we draw close to one another. That's where we find our true friendships, our true meaning is getting through some of those tough moments. And
Yeah.
so the realness of the movie was important. And I didn't think I was going to ask this question, but what do you think is the future of Hollywood? Do you think we'll see a lot more spiritual films? Because, I'm in the near-death experience community, and everyone who writes a book about their near-death experience thinks they need a movie about it. And then other people think, well, maybe we need a museum that captures just near-death experiences where you can walk in and see, what people have experienced in the afterlife. But what do you think is the future of spirituality in film?
Okay, we want to separate Hollywood
Yes.
from the rest of the filmmaking world, because what we grew up knowing as Hollywood no longer exists. It's a completely different system now. It was teetering on the brink of financial insolvency before the pandemic, and the pandemic put it right into the abyss. Somebody just did a study about people going back to movie theaters, and 50% of people, and this is recent, this has just been in the last couple of weeks, 50% of people who identified themselves as being either regular or occasional moviegoers before the pandemic, 50% of them have no plans to ever go back in a theater.
Yeah,
That's,
and I wonder why. I know why I'm not drawn to it, because I'm not seeing artistic, spiritual films. I'm seeing big money productions,
that's
that
right.
are action.
Yeah, and that is a lot of reasons for people. Also, the expense, the inconvenience, unfortunately, the lack of courtesy that has happened over the last 20 or 30 or 40 years. There's been a lot of reasons for that. Netflix has really taken over the film industry. Now, you can do a movie like Spider-Man or the latest Star Wars movie, a big superhero Marvel comic movie that the whole family can go to. And recently, the most recent Spider-Man film has gotten to $1 billion already worldwide. You can still do that. But for ordinary films that are spiritual, that may not have that pizzazz to them, but have a spiritual heart, people don't realize what Netflix has become. Netflix has over 200 million monthly subscribers. It's not hard to do the math on $13.99 a month, American dollars, as to what they're getting. In 2021, they spent over $18 billion on content. So is there an audience? Yes, because Netflix wants audience segments that they don't feel that they get regularly. That's the reason they got involved with a movie called Crazy Rich Asians. And they talk about this openly. They weren't getting Asian films that they thought the audience would respond to. And that was such a mainstream movie. Now they have all kinds of films from South Korea and from Japan and from China. It has become a staple on Netflix. And I say to people, look, if you want to get something that is very spiritual done, you need to find your way into Netflix, which, by the way, is not an easy task. As you can imagine, everybody wants to get in there. It's not an easy thing to do. Fortunately, I have retired from producing films. I'm not going to be doing that anymore in my life, or else I would be trying to figure out how I could get into Netflix. But I do think there will be room for these films, but it is going to be difficult because a lot of movie executives find the subject matter of these films to be very threatening, because it's about morality. It's about doing the right thing. And I can tell you, the movie business, which I loved being in, and I was in it for almost 40 years, and I will always honor that, is one of the most treacherous, backstabbing businesses you can imagine. I mean, that in politics, pretty close. And it's not an easy business to be around and to be in. And anyone who's in it is kind of fighting all the time to get to where they want to go. But still, films come through that have such a beautiful heart to them. There was a movie a few years ago that no one ever saw, no one ever heard of, called Collateral Beauty, that I urge people to see, because it's Will Smith and Helen Mirren. It's a great cast, and it's really about surviving the worst experience that a human being, I think, can have, and that is the loss of a child. And the subject matter of it scared people away from it. And I want to say to anyone, watch it. It is one of the great love stories you're going to see. And movies like that sneak through. It's what we tried to do, and we did for 16 years with The Circle, which is to curate those movies for our subscribers. They do get made, but unfortunately, Netflix doesn't tell you what to watch. You know, they have an algorithm that kind of connects you to those things, but you don't have somebody saying, okay, look, you have an interest in spirituality. Here's this movie this month. So you have to dig harder for it, but they're there.
Wonderful. And this is perhaps my final question to you, but what did you feel when you started communicating with Lauren was her biggest message to you and others? Like, what really came through that you were like, oh, she wants to share this with others?
I'm here. I have it on my computer here. Quote, I'm here with you, unquote. And I think in that quote, it is so much, because we are not, most of us are taught when we're young that this kind of communication is possible. That yes, our physical bodies cease to exist, at least the way they exist on this plane, but our spirit and our soul lives on. And we can communicate with that. It's not something we can do if the other person or on the other side doesn't want to do it. But if the other person wants to do it, that communication is there. And the sentence that I always come back to when I have sad moments, which I think all of us who grieve will have for the rest of our lives. Someone once said that grief lasts as long as love does. And it certainly has been in my life. New Year's Eve was our would have been our 15th wedding anniversary. We got married on New Year's Eve. Those moments can be challenging. This year, I want to tell people it was my 4th time, and we actually celebrated. And it wasn't painful. We had a lot of fun, watched a couple of movies together that we had always loved before in the past. And I believe that all of this, when you get down to it, is I'm here with you. I love you. When you have that, you have everything you need.
Beautiful, beautifully said. And I hope you wrote in the book about your childhood experiences, your spiritual experiences as well. Did you include those? Because you told me before this interview started that
yes,
this has been a life.
Actually, now that I think about it, I don't remember. I don't think we did put that childhood experience in the book. I actually really honestly now, Tricia, I don't remember if it's there. You know, I talk about it a lot. So there's a part of me that believes that it is, but it might not be.
Well, we'll have to do a follow-up interview.
You know, sure that when we finish this call, I'm going to go check, because I actually don't remember.
Well, thank you, Stephen, so much for your work and for all the beautiful work that you put out into the world, and you continue to support people and support them on their spiritual journey. But I encourage people to check out your book. I will check it out as well, and I look forward to being in communication with you. But thank you so much.
I hope so too. And thank you, Tricia, for the work that you're doing. You know, we're all doing different versions of the same work. And as I said, I have known about you and heard about you for quite some time, and I'm very flattered and honored that I got to have this time to talk to you and talk to your audience. So thank you for that. And I wish everybody a wonderful 2022. Let's get this pandemic behind us. Yes,
may the veil just open up more and more for everyone. May they hear that communication, but it's an honor for me too. So thank you so much.
You bet.
For those who are watching, please check out Stephen's links and check out the link to my spiritual community. I love to be in conversation with you, but may you be blessed.